guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Kaylin and we are back with another video. This is the last part of our Esther series. In August, our theme was becoming, and we've been walking through the book of Esther chapter by chapter, pulling out different lessons for the different seasons of becoming that God calls us into. So this has been a month of just trying to fully understand what it means to become and the process of becoming who God created us to be. So in part 1, we talked about the preparation of becoming. Part 2, we talked about the courage in becoming. And in this last part, we're going to be closing with Esther chapter 7 through 10. And we're going to be seeing God's justice, victory, and the legacy unfold of Esther's story. So this ending is so powerful. It literally is just amazing watching God work throughout this entire book. And no matter what, this ending serves as a reminder that no matter what season you're in, God will always complete what he starts. And we're gonna see that as soon as we hop right into the video. So this is the last resource that I have. This is the Daughters of Grace, the Women of the Bible and the God of Grace. This is also by the Daily Grace Co. And we're going to find Esther. So we're going to read Esther in here, and then we're going to get into actually reading the last couple of chapters. So Esther 1 through 10. There is something everyone loves about a story of royalty, and a story of an orphan girl becoming a queen is one that seems to captivate the little girl in all of us. The book of Esther tells us about this young Jewish girl, Hadassah, known by her Persian name Esther, who would rise in rank from orphan girl to queen to deliverer of her people. The story starts with the story of another queen, Vashti. Vashti was the queen and wife of King A. She refused to come out during his party. Her act of defiance to the king would cause her to lose her place as queen and be banished from the palace. The king was now on the search for a new queen, and all of the kingdom's eligible young women were in the running. It is here that we are introduced to Esther, as she is brought as one of the women with the potential to be queen. She goes through months of preparation until her chance with the king comes, and when her turn comes, we are told that the king loved her more than all other women. She was certainly a beautiful and virtuous woman, but we can also be assured that God was providentially working in this situation for her to become queen. In the meantime, Esther's uncle Mordecai uncovered a plot to kill the king and save his life. However, he would not bow to Haman, and this would cause some issues. Haman is hatching an evil plot to kill God's people, and Mordecai knows that Esther may be the answer to this devastating problem. Mordecai knew that because of God's covenant with his people, the Jews would be saved, but he didn't want Esther to miss the chance to be used by God. He urges her to go to the king and implores her that perhaps she has been placed in her role as queen for such a time as this. Going before the king may seem like a simple request, but in this culture, it could have meant certain death for Esther. The queen was not permitted to go to the king unless he had called her, and it had been over 30 days since he had called for her. Esther chose to go anyway, and in Esther 4:16, she tells Mordecai that if she perishes, she perishes. We have already seen what happened when Vashti defied the king, and Esther was certain that her fate would likely be far worse. But in the king's love for Esther and God's divine providence, Esther won the favor of the king, and he held out his golden scepter to her. Her request was simply that the king and Haman come to dinner that she would prepare for them. When the king couldn't sleep that night, he was reminded of how Mordecai had saved his life and realized that Mordecai was never honored for his help. The king asked Haman what he should do for a man that he wanted to honor. The selfish and prideful Haman is sure that the king is speaking about him and gives his elaborate plan for his own honor, only to be told to carry it out for Mordecai. Esther would reveal Haman's evil plot at their second dinner and plead for her own life and the life of her people. The king was disgusted by Haman's evil plan, and he hung Haman on the gallows which he had made for Mordecai. Esther had bravely and courageously saved her people. God used her because she was willing to be used. He had placed her in her exact position for such a time as this. God always comes through for his people. He will do what he has promised that he will do, and he will keep his covenant. We have the privilege of being used by him in his divine plan. We can be used by the Lord, or we can let him pass us by and use someone else. But at the end of our lives, let's look back and be able to say that we were willing servants that he used freely. He has put us in our places for such a time as this, and we want to be used in his service. His plan may not always be the easy one, but it will be worth it to be used by the king. And then it just has like some questions. It says, what do we learn about God and his character in the life of Esther? What character qualities, positive or negative, do we see demonstrated in Esther's life? And then what can I learn from Esther's story that I can apply to my own life? And that is all. I highly recommend this book. This is all the resources that I've read are really, really good when you're doing your Bible studies, just to kind of give you like a little summary of what you're reading. So now we're going to get right back into Esther. We left off on chapter 7 and we have 7, 8, 9, and 10 to read. So Haman is executed. The king and Haman came to feast with Esther the queen. Once again, on the second day, while drinking wine, the king asked Esther, Queen Esther, whatever you ask will be given to you. Whatever you seek, even half the kingdom will be done. Queen Esther answered, If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life. This is my request, and spare my people. This is my desire. For my people and I have been sold to destruction, death, and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent. Indeed, the trouble wouldn't be worth burdening the king. King A spoke up and asked Queen Esther, Who is this, and where is the one who would devise such a scheme? Esther answered, The adversary and enemy is this evil Haman. Haman stood terrified before the king and queen. The king arose in anger and went from where they were drinking wine to the palace garden. Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life because he realized the king was planning something terrible for him. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, Would he actually violate the queen while I'm in the house? As soon as the statement left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harbona, one of the king's eunuchs, said, There is a gallows 75 feet tall at Haman's house that he made for Mordecai, who gave the report that saved the king. The king said, Hang him on it. They hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. So already in chapter 7, oh my goodness. Like, the table just turned. Esther finally revealed her identity, her people, and what Haman had planned against him. The king walked out, came back, and saw Haman like begging for his life. God was now ready for Esther to speak. She knew that this was the time that she needed to say everything that she needed to say. Literally, as soon as Esther revealed everything and the king left and came back, Haman was immediately taken away. Like, he didn't even get time to explain his actions, defend anything, say anything, give an account for why he did what he did. Nothing. It was just like, time to go. So Haman was hung on the gallows he prepared for Mordecai. We saw in the previous chapters that his family had told him to do this, to build this thing for Mordecai to be hung on, and now he's the one being hung on it. So God's enemies will often fall by their own wicked designs, and that is just like crazy, like how the tables have turned. You're being hung on the very thing that you made for someone else to be hung on. And it just points out like the Lord is a God of reversals. So chapter 8 is Esther intervenes for the Jews. That same day, King A awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed her relationship to Mordecai. So in here I put Proverbs 13:22, the sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. So everything that was Haman's was now given to Esther. The king removed his signet ring he had recovered from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put him in charge of Haman's estate. Then Esther addressed the king again. She fell at his feet, wept, and begged him to revoke the evil of Haman and Agagite and his plot he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter toward Esther, so she got up and stood before the king. She said, If it pleases the king and I have found favor with him, if the matter seems right to the king and I am pleasing in his eyes, let a royal edict be written. Let it revoke the documents the scheming Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how could I bear to see the disaster that would come on my own people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives? King A said to Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, Look, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hanged on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. Write in the king's name whatever pleases you concerning the Jews, and seal it with the royal signet ring. A document written in the king's name and sealed with the royal signet cannot be revoked. On the 23rd day of the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, the royal scribes were summoned. Everything was written exactly as Mordecai commanded for the Jews, to the satraps, the governors, and the officials of the 127 provinces from India to Cush. The edict was written for each province in its own script, for each ethnic group in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in King Ahaz's name and sealed the edicts with the royal signet ring. He sent the documents by mounted couriers who rode fast horses bred in the royal stables. The king's edict gave the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possessions as spoils of war. This would take place on a single day throughout all the provinces of King A on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. A copy of the text issued as law throughout every province was distributed to all the people, so the Jews could be ready to avenge themselves against their enemies on that day. The couriers rode out in haste on their royal horses at the king's urgent command. The law was also issued in the fortress of Susa. Mordecai went from the king's presence, clothed in royal blue and white, with a great gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen. The city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and the Jews celebrated with gladness, joy, and honor. In every province and every city where the king's command and edict reached, gladness and joy took place among the Jews. There was a celebration and a holiday, and many of the ethnic groups of the land professed themselves to be Jews because fear of the Jews had overcome them. So I underlined that and put sinners were saved because they confessed to be Jews. So notes from chapter 8, God can turn things around on a dime, like he just flipped a switch completely. Esther wrote new orders so the Jews could defend themselves against the plan of Haman, so they weren't able to revoke the plan that Haman had because it was already written and set. It couldn't be revoked, but the king allowed them to write another order, and this one would allow them to at least defend themselves against those who were getting ready to attack them. So this gave them the authority to fight against their enemies. And just kind of parallel between us, we have the authority to fight over the enemies, to fight when it comes to spiritual warfare, to fight when it comes to the things that happen to us in our lives. We don't have to just sit and let things happen to us. God has given us the authority through Jesus Christ dying for us and saving us. We now have that authority that we should be living in as God's children to fight against the schemes of the enemy. And that is why we need to put on the armor of God every single day and awaken and arise. So their mourning turned into joy. They didn't know what they were going to do. God stepped in, flipped the script, and now they, could defend themselves. And that was a joyous turnaround for them. Unbelievers had seen the deliverance and favor that God bestowed on his people, and they wanted his covenant protection too. So that's when people profess to be being Jew now. So chapter 9, victories of the Jews. The king's command and law went into effect on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. On the day when the Jews' enemies had hoped to overpower them, just the opposite happened. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. In each of King A's provinces, the Jews assembled in their cities to attack those who intended to harm them. Not a single person could withstand them. Fear of them fell on every nationality. All the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the royal civil administrators aided the Jews because they feared Mordecai. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the provinces as he became more and more powerful. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them. They did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the fortress of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, including Parshandatha, Dalphon, Abspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmishta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vasatha. Y'all, bear with the names, okay? They killed these 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. However, they did not seize any plunder. On that day, the number of people killed in the fortress of Susa was reported to the king. The king said to Queen Esther, "In the fortress of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Whatever you ask will be given to you. Whatever you seek will also be done. Esther answered, If it pleases the king, may the Jews who are in Susa also have tomorrow to carry out today's law, and may the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be hung on the gallows. The king gave the orders for this to be done, so a law was announced in Susa, and they hung the bodies of Haman's 10 sons. The Jews in Susa assembled again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not seize any plunder. The rest of the Jews in the royal provinces assembled, defending themselves, and gained relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not seize any plunder. They fought on the 13th day of the month of Adar and rested on the 14th, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews in Susa had assembled on the 13th and the 14th days of the month. They rested on the 15th day of the month, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. This explains why the rural Jews who live in villages observe the 14th day of the month of Adar as a time of rejoicing and feasting. It is a holiday when they send gifts to one another. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in all of King A's provinces, both near and far. He ordered them to celebrate the 14th and 15th days of the months of Adar every year, because during those days the Jews gained relief from their enemies. That was a month where their sorrow was turned into rejoicing and their mourning into a holiday. They were to be days of feasting, rejoicing, and of sending gifts to one another and to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the practice they had begun, as Mordecai had written them to do. For Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them. He cast the pur, that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when the matter was brought before the king, he commanded by letter that the evil plan Haman had devised against the Jews returned on his own head, and that he should be hanged with his son on the gallows. For this reason, these days are called Purim, from the word pur, because all of the instructions in this letter, as well as what they have witnessed and what had happened to them, the Jews bound themselves, their descendants, and all who joined with them to a commitment that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days each and every year according to the written instructions and according to the time appointed. These days are remembered and celebrated by every generation, family, province, and city, so that these days of Purim will not lose their significance in Jewish life, and their memory will not fade from their descendants. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote this second letter with full authority to confirm the letter about Purim. He sent letters with assurances of peace and security to all the Jews who were in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of King A. In order to confirm these days of Purim at the proper time, just as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had established them, and just as they had committed themselves and their descendants to the practices of fasting and lamentation. So Esther's command confirmed these customs of Purim, which were then written into the record. So chapter 9 was just talking about the victory and everything that was recorded. So God provided deliverance, but his people still had to fight. And this is exactly what I was saying. We have to step into our authority. We have it. We have to use it. God gives it to us. He will deliver us, but it requires action on our behalf. We can't just sit around and wait for God to do everything for us. He's given us authority to be able to take action and to be able to fight for ourselves and step into that God-given authority. He demands our involvement. So Haman looked to chance to fulfill his wicked desires, but the people of God knew that the deliverance didn't come by chance, but by the providential hand of God. So they knew no matter what, they would end in victory. God was going to save them. God is orchestrating the events in our lives according to his sovereign plan and for his kingdom purposes. And when it was talking about celebrating, they celebrated to never forget what God had done and never fail to give him glory. So when God does things in our lives, it's important to not forget those things and to remember and be grateful and to celebrate and find joy in those things and know that, just don't forget what God has done in your life. No matter what it is, how long it may have been in the past, don't forget all the things that God has done, because the same God who did it before is the same God who's going to do it today, and it's the same God who's going to do things for you in the future. So then we go to the last chapter, chapter 10, and it's talking about Mordecai's fame. So God really raised Mordecai's position. We talked in the previous chapters about how he was not recognized for what he did at first. And I was talking about how, don't grow weary in other people not recognizing or showing you the appreciation after you do something, because in the end, God will make sure that you are recognized and that you are rewarded. And that's exactly what happened to Mordecai. Mordecai went from this lower position to now he's the most popular, powerful man now. So what happened was for the sake of God's kingdom all along. Everything was not easy. They had to go through this journey, but this was all a part of God's plan, and it was all to ensure that God's people would be saved, and people like Haman and, his descendants and stuff like that would not continue on. So chapter 10, King A imposed a tax throughout the land, even to the farthest shores. All of his powerful and magnificent accomplishments and the detailed account of Mordecai's great rank with which the king had honored him, have they not been written in the book of the historical events of the king of Media and Persia? Mordecai the Jew was second only to King A. He was famous among the Jews and highly esteemed by many of his relatives. He continued to pursue prosperity for his people and to speak for the well-being of all his descendants. So, wow. It just shows you how elevated he was. And the person who elevated him was God. There was nothing really that he did for the most part. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. And he did the right thing when he made sure to let them know that there was an attack on King A and that there were people planning to assassinate him. So do the right thing. Don't grow weary when you may not get recognized for doing the right thing. In the end, God will reward you. He will elevate you exactly how he desires and what's in his plan. So we're going to go back to chapter 7, and we're just going to talk about kind of what it is, a little summary and the lessons from it. So Esther finally comes out and exposes Haman's plot to destroy her people. And Haman is literally, his ending is being hung on the gallows that he had made for Mordecai. And this just shows us that no plan of the enemy can override God's plan. In Isaiah 54, verse 17, that is the verse that says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." The weapons form. Haman had his plan. He had his orders, and, they were prepared. They were ready to be taken place, but they weren't going to prosper. God stepped in. He put his hand on everything, and they were able to defend themselves. Haman was taken out of the picture completely, and then the Jews were able to defend themselves. So the weapon formed, but it didn't prosper. So sometimes it feels like opposition is rising up around us, but Esther's story shows us that God is always working behind the scenes. God is a God of justice, and he will defend his people. So another overall lesson, Esther reveals her identity as a Jew and pleads for her people. Haman, the enemy, was exposed for all of his schemes and his downfall. It was promised. I think it was his wife that said that, your downfall is certain. Yeah, she said, your downfall is certain, and that came to pass. The very gallows he built for Mordecai became his downfall. So God can turn the enemy's weapons back on them. What was meant to destroy you can become the very place where God shows his justice. So then chapter 8, we're going to be talking about how Esther didn't just stop with exposing Haman. She went back to the king and tried to secure a plan so that her people would become protected. So she got this order to be made that they were able to defend themselves. So she didn't just stop at saying okay, Haman has this in plan, I'm done with it. No, Haman has this planned, he's taken care of. Now what can I do to save my people? What can I do so that we have a fighting chance? She kept going. She was still bold and courageous. Courage isn't just something that you do once. It's not a one-time thing. It's persistence. She could have stayed quiet after her after her asking the king to do the one thing and, like, you know, taking care of Haman, but she kept going. She persisted and she pressed further in order to save her people. And as a result of all her courage and boldness, she saved an entire nation. Like, her purpose is huge. So your obedience, the overall takeaway is your obedience and persistence can shift things not only for you, but for those connected to you. Your boldness may be the very thing that sets your family, your community, your friends, your job, whatever it is that's connected to you free. So don't hold back on persisting and doing the things that you feel like God has called you to do. So Esther and Mordecai were given the authority to write a new order. They were able to defend themselves, and in the end, Mordecai was elevated and honored. So the main lesson is, when it feels like something in your life is sealed and done with, and there's nothing that you can do about it, and it's kind of like, you know, the doom, or it feels like the end for you, just remember that God has the final say. He makes a way for protection. He makes a way for redemption. And ultimately, as God's children, we will get the victory. The weapons will not prosper. So chapter 9, we talk a little bit more about the victory. And we see that they were able to defend themselves and fight for themselves and overtake what was meant to destroy them. So what started out as a day of destruction became a day of joy and celebration, and they recognized that as the Feast of Purim. And it just shows them, like, the thing that was meant to break them became a testimony for them. So whatever it is in your life that may have been really, really hard, really rough, really shook things up in your life, really changed who you were, really affected you in a way, that very moment, that very thing that was set out to break you, what the enemy meant for evil, God turned to good, like, that very thing is your testimony of his power. You're still here. You still have a fighting chance. You can step into your authority. You can be courageous. You can be bold. It's just, you have to just believe it. You really do. You have to believe that you have the authority and power to get through whatever it is, and know that ultimately your God is going to get it through, because he's working things out. He has his hand on everything. It may be hard, but I promise the victory is coming. So it's just a reminder that God will turn mourning into dancing. I love the song, There Be Joy in the Morning. And it's just like, weeping may endure for the night, but joy will come in the morning. And I love that so much, because it's so true with the things that we go through in our lives. Like, our lives, life is hard, okay? Life is hard. But with God, that's how we make it through. With our obedience, with our persistence, with our faith in him, that's how we make it through. So no matter what area of your life that you feel just so heavy and broken, hopeless, whatever it may be, God can turn those very areas into places of joy, and then that be your testimony to then go share, share with others and give them the hope that they need. Other people are going through something that you've been through already, and you can be that very person to help them get through it, to see the other side, to see, you know, that they can make it and they can get through whatever it may be. So don't discredit or discount, like, the things that you've been through, because those very things are testimonies that you can use to help other people. So chapter 9, victory and celebration. Mourning turn into joy. Don't forget to celebrate what God has done. Victories are not just for us. They're testimonies that build faith for future generations. So these things were all written down so that they could be looked back on, which is said, like, everything was written down so they would not lose significance, and the memory will not fade from their descendants. So share so that your story lives on throughout the generations to come in your legacy. And then chapter 10, Mordecai's fame, we just learned kind of like, you know, his faithfulness and influence leave a lasting impact. He was courageous, and he was definitely aligned with God's purposes, and he was able to be a person to help lead and guide Esther throughout her life and throughout this situation and time. And that's so important. So just know that, like, your obedience today can shape a legacy for tomorrow. Whatever you walk through faithfully becomes a part of someone else's deliverance story. We all have a part in this life, and it's important that we truly step into our God-given purposes, and we become who God created us to be, because it's not about us. It's about everyone else that is attached to us and connected to us and will be gleaning off of what God has put into us. So, full circle moment, Esther's story began with her kind of being hidden. Then it moved into her being prepared, which required her to step up and be courageous, which led to victory and then ended with legacy. That is exactly what becoming looks like. God doesn't just transform your present. He wants to establish something through you that outlives you. And that's what we talk about, your legacy. You will leave a mark on generations to come. Your obedience, your courage, your yes to God, that is your legacy. And that is what lives on. It doesn't matter about the things that you have, your house, your car, designer stuff, all that kind of stuff. None of that stuff matters. Your legacy that you leave on earth, that is what is important. So that is pretty much it. I just want everyone to just remember that God sees your hidden season. He's appointed it for a reason. Don't get frustrated that you may not be in the spotlight. There's just some things that probably need to be, worked out, and you need to learn some things. Don't be upset with a hidden season, because he's preparing you. He's equipping you so that when it comes time for you to step into what he's called you to, you can do it with courage. You can do it with boldness. And then when you do it, you're gonna end up victorious. No matter what, you're going to end up victorious with God by your side. So at the end of the day, he's gonna establish a legacy in your life, but you have to say yes. You have to surrender, and you have to be willing to be obedient and do what it is that he asks you to do, even if it's scary, even if it's, uncertain of what is going to happen or what the future holds. That is the beauty in the becoming. So Esther's story is not just history. It's a picture of how God is literally working in each and every one of our lives today. So I hope that this Bible study series blessed you guys. Please let me know in the comments what your takeaway was from Esther. What is something that you're going to take away and remember as you go on in your journey of life, of becoming exactly who God created you to be. So if you didn't, I would hope you already watched part 1 and 2, because this was the last one. But share this with someone who you think it may help. I feel like we're in a season of truly really understanding who God has called us to be. What are we here for? What is our purpose? And walking boldly in that. So all my resources I will have linked down below. I am so happy that we got through it. I apologize for it being a little bit late. I have a lot of just life updates for you guys. I've just been in awe of all that God is doing in my life, and I'm just trying to be obedient in my own way of what it is that God is asking me to do. So I hope to be consistent moving forward after you guys learn about all the changes and everything that is going on in my life. But yeah, it's been a month of becoming. In September, we are focusing on understanding and walking in the fact that we have been chosen. So we learned about becoming for August, what it takes to become who God created you to be, what that looks like, what the becoming process looks like. And now we're going to step into understanding the fact that you've been chosen, what it means to be chosen, and how to feel confident and ready that you were the one that's chosen, like how to completely walk in what it is that God has called you to do. Because I think that's the next step is, okay, I know that I'm becoming who God wants me to be. Now, how can I show up? How can I fully walk in exactly what he wants me to do? And how can I do this confidently? Like, you have to believe that you were chosen. So that is what we're going to be focusing on in September. So I just want to thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. It's the day that the Lord has made.